At my granddaughter's wedding, my son demanded I sign over my $400,000 house as proof of love. When I calmly refused, he snapped and smashed a cake plate over my head. Then my granddaughter's fiancé stood up and revealed a truth no one expected. I never imagined that the happiest day of my granddaughter's life would become the day my family finally exposed every lie it had been hiding for years. My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 76 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Vermont. And for most of my life, I believed that family was the one thing money could never destroy. I was wrong. My late husband, Richard, and I weren't rich. We never owned luxury cars or vacation homes. Richard worked as an electrician for 38 years, and I spent my career teaching third grade. Every paycheck was carefully planned before it was even deposited. We skipped expensive vacations, repaired things instead of replacing them, and saved every extra dollar we could. When Richard passed away after 53 years of marriage, he left me with only one instruction. Promise me you'll never let anyone pressure you into giving away the house unless it's your decision. At the time, I laughed through my tears. Who would ever pressure me? Richard looked at me with a sadness I didn't understand. People change when money gets involved. I wish he had been wrong. Our home wasn't just a house. It was where Daniel took his first steps, where Emily learned to bake cookies standing on a little wooden stool beside me, where every Christmas morning began with cinnamon rolls and hot chocolate. The walls held birthdays, graduations, arguments, laughter, tears, and memories that could never be replaced. The house had recently been appraised at just over $400,000. To me, it was priceless. To my son, it had become an investment. Daniel hadn't always been like that. Growing up, he was polite, generous, and incredibly protective of me. When Richard became sick, Daniel visited almost every weekend. He mowed the lawn, fixed broken shelves, and constantly reminded me that I wasn't alone. But after Richard died, something shifted. His visits became shorter. His phone calls became rarer, and every conversation somehow found its way back to one topic: the house. Mom, it's too much work for someone your age. You should think about downsizing. You could move into a retirement community. You don't need 4 bedrooms. At first, I thought he was simply worried about me. Then the suggestions became requests. The requests became pressure. Eventually, they became demands. One afternoon, he arrived carrying a folder full of paperwork. I already found you a condo, he said with a smile. You'll love it. I hadn't even mentioned moving. He spread photos across my kitchen table as though the decision had already been made. What about my garden? I asked. You won't need one. What about your father's workshop? We'll clean it out. What about everything inside this house? We'll deal with it. Not you. We. That single word told me everything. The house was no longer mine in his mind. It already belonged to him. I quietly slid the folder back across the table. I'm staying right here. His smile disappeared. For the first time in my life, my own son looked at me like I was standing between him and something he believed he deserved. After that day, weeks would pass without hearing from him. Then, out of nowhere, he'd call and pretend nothing had happened. He'd ask how I was feeling, whether I needed groceries, whether I had seen my doctor recently. And just when I thought he genuinely cared, he'd casually mention the house again. Every single time. The only bright spot in those years was my granddaughter, Emily. Unlike her father, she never asked for anything. She visited because she wanted to. Sometimes we'd spend entire afternoons baking pies, watching old movies, or flipping through photo albums of Richard. She always asked me to tell the same stories. How Grandpa proposed during a thunderstorm. How we bought our first couch for $25. How we danced barefoot in the kitchen whenever our favorite song came on. She listened like every word mattered. When she introduced me to her fiancé, Michael, I liked him immediately. He shook my hand firmly, looked me directly in the eye, and spent more time asking about my life than talking about himself. That had become surprisingly rare. Over the next 2 years, he visited with Emily several times. Sometimes they helped me rake leaves. Sometimes they fixed things around the house. One Saturday, Michael noticed Richard's old toolbox sitting untouched in the garage. Instead of asking how much it was worth, he asked if Richard had taught Daniel how to use every tool inside. That simple question made me smile, because it showed he valued the memories, not the price tag.